Hi everyone, Internet this is book reader here. Today I want to talk about Fat Leonard, how one man bribed, bilked, and seduced the US Navy by Craig Whitlock. This is another one of those journalist books which people who complain about how there's no journalists nowadays will never read because they're too busy complaining instead. The author himself is a journalist that worked for the Washington Post, and he's one of the initial reporters of the contradiction between what the public know about American war with the Afghan versus what they were saying in private. How their government lied from president to president about why they need to send troops to Afghanistan until they turned into the disastrous Taliban takeover where the president of Afghan ran to Arab on day one of the Taliban takeover. His first book, The Afghanistan Paper, is based on that reports, and this is his second book, which is about a Malaysian who conned the US Navy for billions of dollars. In any country, their military are often some of the most corrupt people in the government, with a lot of people who they work with had to give them a good time when they visit, using expensive cars to drive them around the city, visiting places to have expensive drinks, and some of the most expensive sex workers, and then shower them with expensive gifts to top it off. Often the gift including cash because everything is considered legal for these military guys. And that is also the case with Glenn Francis Leonard, or more known for his nickname Fat Leonard, a Malaysian who owned the Glenn Defense Marine Asia, a contractor company based in Singapore that held a $200 million worth of defense contract with the USA to resupply every US warship and submarine at every port in the Western Pacific. He bribed the Navy with a lot of the things I mentioned above: money, sex, power, the usual cliché vices for these people. And in doing so, Leonard managed to gain a lot of insider information from the Navy, including some classified information that he then used to blackmail and recruit the people in the Navy to benefit him in the long run. The case incidentally opened wiped the corruption of the Navy that in America is considered to be an organization that have a good moral compass, which is a weird thing to believe about an American government organization, but that's what military propaganda did to a country, I guess. Unfortunately for them, the Fat Leonard scandal showed us the rot of the Navy, and the more the author investigated and reported the scandal and asked more questions, the more surprising things he found, which is why he wrote this book. As a background, Leonard himself is not the kind of guy who never got into trouble with the legal system. In 1986, when he was still living in Malacca, the cop already had him on their radar because he's a known troublemaker, and when they received some tips about his involvement at an armed robbery, they searched his house and found two guns, which in Malaysia is outlawed. But with his rich parents' help, he managed to get the best lawyer and even doctor's testimony that he deserved less severe punishment, and as a result, he got off with the lightest sentence possible: probation and some fine. The case got a retrial along with 3 other criminal cases which lasted 3 years, where in 1989 he still got off with life sentencing. He got 6 whipping where the person who whipped him is a family friend, and as a result he got only 3 light whipping and 3 missed swipe. He also got a year in prison, but they released him early for good behavior. The lesson that he took from this light punishment is that with a little luck and the right connection, he could get away with anything. Cliche as it might be, while his parent both comes from a wealthy background, he didn't have the best life at home. His father was a cheating and abusive husband, and as a result, his mother left the house, taking her eldest daughter and the youngest son. Leonard, the middle child, was left behind to live with his father, who was busier with his girlfriends instead of being a father. And again, his life went the cliche route of rich parents trying to pay others to do their responsibility instead of being responsible for their own child. He sent Leonard to Upland School, a new international boarding school in Penang, to get some discipline. But it didn't take long for him to get expelled because he was driving his father's car illegally. Thankfully, his father punished him, which teaches him right and wrong, and he grew up to be an upstanding guy with a good moral compass and moral backbone. Just kidding. As a punishment, his father gave him a job in his company, Glenn Security Services, and surprisingly he's a good fit in the security company because of how tall and hardworking he is. At least more hardworking than even his father, who is still busy womanizing. Leonard, who got job only because of nepotism, saw opportunity that his father didn't take and convinced him to make a new company, Glenn Marine Enterprise, which he owned and ran himself. As a mixed son with different cultural heritage, like many others, he got caught in American pop culture the most, dressing like Elvis and watching and rewatching The Godfather, and he also got attracted to opulent lifestyle that is portrayed on those pop culture, buying expensive luxury items like watches, bikes, cars, etc., and he started frequenting the red district. This is when he started to learn how to mix business with pleasure. He is a charming and charismatic guy for people who only know him on a surface level, and a lot of the ship captains under his contract would gladly accept his offer to be brought to bars and hotels where they can take some girls upstairs to get some massage. And doing so, he found that they are much more willing to give him all sorts of favors in return. His company even eventually grew big enough that in 1992, his customers are not just merchant marines, but even the US Navy started to sign a contract with him. As usual, he made sure that they had a premium experience when they were there, inviting at that time Commander Harry Guest and the 3 female officers with him to eat lobster dinner at Eden Seafood Village, and among other things. He insisted on paying for everything, which is illegal by the way, and he smoothly lied about his background and experience that he left such a good impression on them that he was the one who they contracted to recover a jet that crashed in Malaysia the next year. His business got big enough that he is receiving contracts not just the ones based in Malaysia and Singapore, but even Philippines and Indonesia. He even opened a branch in Bali where he cheated on his wife with one of his hired workers there. It was around this time that he got the nickname Fat Leonard. The more his wealth and business grew, the more daring he became. He started doing illegal things like taking waste from US Navy and then dumping them illegally to cut costs. The Navy is of course aware of this, and Leonard paid them to look the other way by taking them to the usual luxury spot in Bali and paying them in cash if that's not enough. He once bragged about paying someone $2,000 in cash. He also started targeting young officers with loose morals that he can easily get to be on his side by showing and giving them the perks of being his friend. One of these was Robert Gilbo, whose first introduction to Leonard is seeing him surrounded by a harem of attractive women, a start to a relationship that lasted for 16 years, one of the many US Navy officers that will be on his pocket. The Navy trusted him so much that they decided to contract him when a large aircraft carrier, the USS Independence, was scheduled to port there, and they hired Leonard to resupply the ship. Bigger ship, bigger budget, but unfortunately for Leonard, the supply officer, Jim Mouse, was unlike most officers that Leonard faced before, refusing any bribes and refusing to bend the rule. This difference, and coupled with how this is Leonard's first experience handling such a big ship, he made many mistakes and left a bad impression on Mouse. In around 2002, things changed for the Navy. In October 12 in Aden, USS Cole was bombed by Al-Qaeda using a regular motorboat, something they never experienced before, making the sea a much less safe space for them in various places. Leonard, afraid of losing his contract, decided to make shift a barrier using heavy barges and pontoons linked by steel chains and marketed as the Ring of Steel, which the Navy trusted to take because they have no better idea. While another bombing in Bali in 2002 reduced the Navy's activity in there, overall, Leonard still get a lot of benefit from Al-Qaeda's activities because it reduced his competitors because they cannot afford Ring of Steel of their own. And because of US paranoia at that time, all their budget is going to military. Leonard can just put any number in their contract and it will all be approved because they wanted to avoid a second USS Cole. Strangely, the Navy also never did any field training on the Ring of Steel even when they cost so much despite it being just mostly barrel and chains. Low cost, high price and lots of demands made Leonard a very rich man very quickly, but he's never one for self-control, so his lifestyle only got worse. In Singapore, he even had a servant that is dedicated to just putting on and off his shoes. His parties with the Navy also got much worse, with every party basically a banquet with an orgy. He did this so much that the Navy officer changed his nickname from Leonard the Fat to Leonard the Legend, and for every party he hosted, he charged their ship extra, which they happily obliged. On some of these parties, often the girls was taking pictures being very cozy with this Navy officer that already had family back on the state, one of the many materials that Leonard collected just in case he needed them. Starting from here, we got a lot more names of the Navy higher-ups because most of them have known or experienced the reputation of what being Leonard's friend was. A lot of them started reaching out to him when their ship are heading to Singapore where Leonard now stays, and Leonard in return charged the Navy extra for those services. There are attempts to try to stop the party by adding more rules and regulation, but because a lot of them has gone off the deep end, they are willing to sidestep those rules with Leonard as long as they have the chance to do so. Some officers even send him their rule book so he can figure out better ways to sidestep those rules so they can party with their crew. These are adults, by the way, not college students. One of the higher-ups in the Navy, Michael Miller, even voiced his endorsement to Leonard Company multiple times. It got so high up by the time Lieutenant David Scouse found some fraudulent claim by Leonard and sent it to Naval Criminal Investigative Service or NCIS, the department whose main job was investigating Navy crimes. Nothing was being done about it. It's because even the chief of naval operation, the highest ranking admiral in the Navy like Captain Michael Gilday, joined Leonard parties, and it's not the only admirals that were there. But Leonard's most virtuous relation with a Navy officer is definitely with Paul Simpkins. Yes, Simpkins, a senior civil supervisor at the Naval Regional Contracting Center in Singapore. He's currently married to his fifth wife who had cancer while cheating with another girl who will become his sixth wife. So he didn't exactly show any moral backbone in his personal life either. And when Leonard contracted him, he cut him off by asking what's in it for him in this friendship. As a result of this relation, Simpkins got 10 to hundreds of thousands of bribery money, and Leonard get to cut off his competitor in Thailand, Philippines, and Australia, making him gain temporary control of most of Southeast Asia. Which of course is absurdly abnormal. You don't put all your egg in one basket like that to avoid price fixing from lack of competition, so a lot more scrutiny was placed on Glenn defense. But by that point, it was so easy for Leonard to get insider information, including dirt on officers that is trying to stop Glenn defense suspicious activities. So it is not that easy to stop him. It's not an exaggeration that the loyalty of all these officers and as a result the Navy was on Leonard instead of, the Navy. The Navy is just the place they work at, while Leonard is their friend. Eventually, Leonard got even more than insider information. He got military secrets from them, data about the route that the Navy ships are planning to take, etc. Data that not even Russian spies are able to get. And now one Malaysian man have them all. He even got diplomatic immunity despite just being an outsider defense contractor. His ship can go through international water without being checked because it's considered as a part of the US Navy. Leonard boasted that if he wanted to, he could smuggle nuke or drugs. It helps that his staff from Philippines to Indonesia includes ex-politicians who used to work in their own marine. It's corruption across the globe. In the Navy, it's gone long enough that any new Navy members that wanted to have a career in there had to join the corruption or they'll be singled out and orchestrated. It's truly frat boy behavior. Meanwhile, if you still remember Jim Mouse, one of the few Navy officers that went against Leonard, lost his job from recession, and in desperation became a worker for Glenn Security when Leonard recruited him. But he was not given any job and very limited pay. It's a weird petty revenge, a power move. It also didn't take long for Leonard to fire Mouse because he got bored of it. Thankfully, he got a break when Admiral Thomas Trent, the Pacific Fleet Deputy Chief Staff for Logistics, hired him to find out what caused the Navy to bleed so much money there. Mouse didn't exactly receive any information while he's working on Glenn Security, but their corruption was so obvious that it didn't take him long to figure out that Glenn Defense has been fleecing them from their money. Mouse works quickly to itemize everything that Glenn Defense forced them to pay, and he installed systems and upgrades that enabled them to cut those costs. For example, a flow meter that showed how much waste was being taken out of the ship, so Glenn Security cannot blow up those numbers of waste that they've taken care of, aka throw to the ocean to pollute them. Mouse was not trying to take down Leonard or Glenn Business Company. At that point, he was not even aware of the amount of corruption ongoing. He just wanted to cut costs that burden taxpayers. But because of Leonard's corrupt business model where he is spending so much money to enable the corruption in the first place, the successful cost cutting proved to be an existential threat for him. Leonard and the Navy officer went to work to find ways to cut Mouse off, which proved to be difficult since Mouse and the people who work with him in this cost cutting are clean, they're happy with their work, their pay, and are happily married. The only thing Leonard had was the excuse that Mr. Peace gave to Dogback, which is that Dogback used to work for him. But in Leonard's case, it didn't work to get rid of Mouse. But for now, in 2009, that doesn't matter. There are still a lot of Navy officers that Leonard can recruit to be his wall. He goes it up with more officers and their wives who are as entitled as their husband to whatever Leonard can provide for them for free. But in 2012, Mouse's effort has saved the Navy around 25 million a year. 25 million that Leonard could have earned without Mouse. And unbeknown to Leonard, despite all his spies, is that Mouse has found more incriminating evidence by tracing the money that the Navy spent for Glenn Defense. But for now, because Leonard had so many moles, Mouse and part of the NCIS that he had made sure had some moral backbone, dig down and stayed quiet about their investigation. Meanwhile, Leonard's personal life, as many rich people does, is imploding. He keeps changing wives even though not all of them are there just for his money. Morena, for example, a girl he met in Manila, had 2 children with him already. But when he grew bored of her, he left him and took her children. She managed to scrape some money and sue him to get her children back, which she won. But Leonard is such a sore loser who cannot take losing, so he didn't return her 2 kids. Instead, he risked not being able to land on Philippines because he'll get captured if he land there for kidnapping. His penchant for luxuries also got worse and worse, that despite clan defense still making so much money for him, he's losing more money than he earned. At one point, he even slashed the payroll for his worker, where some didn't get paid for 2 to 3 months, making a lot of them to quit, including some of the people who used to be his diehard supporter. All this, coupled with how Leonard, along with some of his mole, got more arrogant, stupid, and reckless, opened the chance for Mouse and the NCIS team to get more and more evidence. They then tried to put a bait to trap him to go to America to arrest him. And Leonard, who's grown confident that he had outsmarted the NCIS, took the bait. By 16 September 2016, for the first time ever, they finally arrested Leonard. The book is crazy well written, despite the Navy refusing to make further comment after the author asked them too much questions. He managed to go over many documents, interviews, leaked texts, and emails to create such a detailed story. He managed to put a timeline of how everything happened and basically every single person who was involved in this corruption in a global scale. It's such a big case that when the team who handled the case arrested the first people who they knew was involved from the first batch of information they got, they are arresting people in 7 different time zones at the same time. That's how big this case was. And of course, all the Navy officers that was involved was also targeted by this case, which is a huge undertaking since this involved the highest rank in the Navy. And in the book, we see the most shameless display of politicians trying to avoid accountability. It's all blame game and I don't recall. But remember about all the dirt that Leonard has gathered during the years? This is when it comes to play. Leonard agreed to help give all the evidence that he had collected for linear sentencing. He even had the chance to get manicure and spa during this time because of how much he got from the USA. But at least everyone else, including the higher-ups, got arrested, and then we all live happily ever after. Just kidding again, of course. Most of these sailors do at least get some form of punishment, but the guys at the highest position, 90 out of the 91 admirals that is involved, only got some scolding to not do that again, like they're a child. Leonard, realizing that this is a long case where his testimony is key, managed to pay a doctor to give him a deadly cancer diagnosis with his steel and enormous will. This enabled him as a prisoner to move to a big house with a pool and 3-car garage and bring his family there. This is despite him being jobless after getting arrested and still owing $30 million to the state from his plea agreement. He even dumbly did a podcast interview with Tom Wright, a journalist who have written about another Malaysian scammer, Jolo. Tom worked quickly and managed to release the podcast before his testimony day. So the investigator got 20 hours of additional audio that they can use as evidence. In desperation, Leonard cut off his ankle bracelet and escaped to Mexico. We have this picture of his wanted poster only because of the incompetence of the people who are supposed to put him in prison. They eventually managed to capture Leonard again because every country refused to take him in, but the damage has already been done. Most of the corrupt Navy officers got away and they even managed to claim innocent and cry about enemy from within, which I'm sure a lot of dumb conspiracy theories add up since they're too lazy to actually read, which is a shame because it's such a wild story if you actually go into it. I'm so glad that I decided to get the book. It got so much detail that I highly recommend to read it yourself to know more about the names and everything. The sexy Santa pictures with the admirals alone are so unreal to see. It's a story about how a rich and insecure alpha male become the center of a massive global corruption. Honestly, it's a 5 for me. What do you think? Let me know if I miss anything, so leave your thoughts in the comment below and subscribe to the channel. That's about it. See ya.